in the pub. At this stage you know the score. Get in a few hours in advance, have a few pints, maybe a Prosecco, just a flute, not a whole bottle, we're not made of money after all. And then, on the stroke of midnight, everyone wishes each other a Happy New Year, before doing battle outside against those same people for the city's last remaining taxis. That's your typical New Year's Eve Dublin experience. This year, or last year rather, I heard about a tradition worth exploring. So on December 31st, I decided to give it a go. Welcome to Publin, a podcast about the culture, history and heritage of pubs at home and abroad. For the purposes of this episode, I'm going to need someone on the ground. So I'm going to pass you over to our roving reporter, John.
Thanks, John. I'm here in my house in Stoneybatter. It's 10:30 on the 31st of December. Soon enough, the clock is going to tick forward past midnight and on to the 1st of January 2024. Usually I'll be spending this time with friends or family, but this year I wanted to explore a tradition that can only be explored for essentially 1 minute of the year, so you have to take these opportunities when they come. So in front of me, I've got a nice big woolly jacket, I've got a hat and scarf, I've got a bottle of extra stout with a bottle opener, and a bag. And I'm going to make the pilgrimage, it's only about 20 minutes now, up outside the Guinness brewery. So the idea is that I had heard a while back that there's a tradition in Guinness to change the date or change the year outside the brewery. And I didn't really know where that was because I think there's the famous Guinness gates around at the Guinness storehouse entrance. There's one or two around either side of that as well. But I could never see a date or I could never see a year. Until recently I saw on Thomas Street, on that entrance, which is more of a industrial entrance rather than a commercial one or one for patrons, that there's an entrance with an arch and two dates either side of it. The first on the left being 1759, the year that the Guinness brewery was opened, and the other is the current year. So at the moment is 2023. I'm going to pop down and see the moment it changes to 2024. Now, I've no idea what's going to happen. I don't know if this is going to be a momentous thing, if there's going to be many people there, if it's going to be me and my Tobler, or it's just friends and family of Guinness employees. But I'm sure we'll find out. I think it might be a nice tradition to be part of. My expectations are that it's going to be a pretty low-key thing. My hopes is that I'm going to go up to Thomas Street, I'm going to crack open a bottle, there's going to be an unveiling, there's going to be a nice little applause and a Happy New Year wished between a few people, and then hopefully off in the distance you can hear the bells ringing in Christchurch or somewhere closer by. So that's how I'm planning on ringing in New Year this year. So the next you'll hear from me, I'll be up on Thomas Street and I'll explain to you how it all went down.
So off I went down through Stoneybatter, across the Liffey, up Bridgefoot Street, right at Thomas Street, and 100 metres down the road I could see a cherry picker in place, with two men at work. I wasn't late just yet, but I could see that they were poised to make a change to the year on the right-hand side of the arch. But there was no crowd to speak of directly outside the gates. However, as I drew closer, I could see that they were tucked away across the road where the path widened. Maybe 50 people had gathered so far, what looked to be mostly families. This was at 11:45 or so. The crowd grew by the minute, some people being dropped down of the car, others getting a taxi hurriedly so as not to miss the main event. This entrance to the brewery might be unfamiliar to you. It's a white arch on Thomas Street set between a row of red brick buildings, clearly not houses, but you might miss that this is all part of the brewery, if you didn't know. To the left of the arched entrance is a year, 1759, for when Arthur Guinness signed the lease on James's Gate, and on the right, the current year. This was still set, of course, to 2023. Around 10 to 15 minutes in advance of the stroke of midnight, the two lads on the cherry picker set about removing the old sign for this year. As they removed that element, you could see that there was a year underneath it, 1990. Perhaps that's when this tradition began, or when the most recent renovations happened to the arch. The new 2024 plaque was seemingly put in place but quickly covered up once more with the old 2023 sign so that they could do a big reveal when the countdown began. The time had drawn nearer and more people were pulling up in taxis and cars and more people joined. I could see that a few people had brought some bubbly, but naturally cans of Guinness were the order of the day. I later found that the two men up in the cherry picker are Owen Kelly and Robbie Minto. In a recent interview with the Irish Times, Robbie Minto said that he grew up literally down the road on Watling Street and had memories of the date being changed in the lead up to Christmas week, with scaffolding being erected and the sign being painted by hand. This would account for the 1990 date underneath the other layers. The two lads took over the tradition in 2008 of placing the hand-painted metal sign on the arch. The tradition of observing the work being done apparently started with the families of these two men going up to celebrate with their loved ones. And then their extended families began to come, and then their friends, and then it snowballed from there. As the clock drew to 3 minutes before midnight, the crowd had grown to a stage that they were spilling out onto the road, and passing traffic slowed down to observe what was going on. There's no choreographing to the event from anyone in Diageo or the brewery. It's a crowd-led, spontaneous event. I lost track of the time, and the next thing I knew, it was time for...
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And that was it. The 2024 sign was revealed, sparklers were lit, and people wished each other a happy new year outside the gates of the sprawling Guinness brewery. I won't exaggerate the event into something it's not. There's no spontaneous falling of snow, no ringing of the Christchurch bells to be heard in the distance, and no mass love-in. But it was a very pleasant and wholesome thing to observe. After a few minutes, people began to make their way across the road to get a more intimate photo with themselves and the new signage in the background to ring in the year 2024. I won't draw this out more than is necessary, as the story is really just a short and simple one about a humble tradition that grew from something small to an annual event where around 80 to 100 people get together to ring in the new year in a very Dublin-oriented fashion. So wherever you are in the world, I'd like to wish you a very happy new year and a prosperous 2024, whatever that means to you. Thanks for listening to this short episode of the Publin Podcast. Thanks so much for listening in 2023, and here's to a good few more episodes in 2024. If you want to get in touch, you can reach me, John, via publinie@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and as always, Sláinte.